Court is now in session.
The subject of today's class is negotiation. And this is more of what's called a soft skill. It is not necessarily like learning the law for this or that particular thing. It is ways to be an effective problem solver. And I think that not enough is done to teach people negotiating strategies. And I remembered that, Reggie and I were playing Ready or Not, and which is hyper-realistic police shooter where you barge in and shoot the bad guys and all that stuff. And when it was all done, I made a point to send Reggie a link to a basic introduction to nonviolent communication on the basis that the more we study war, the more we have to study peace. Because if all you do is take on the lessons that your, let's say, hierarchical superiors, your bosses, or video game companies or whatever want you to learn, it seems to me that you'll learn a lot about making war and not enough about making peace.
Let's talk
about so I say that not to come to you as, the super peacenik hippie and suggest that, violence is never the answer. I don't believe that. Sometimes violence is the answer. But if all of your mental energy goes into learning how to do violence, you will think that violence is the answer in many more cases than it really is. So today, I wanted to give you some basic introduction to negotiation. And this is a law class, so there will be some discussion about plea negotiation and settlement negotiations in civil and criminal cases. But really, what it's about is the soft skill. And that what I hope to teach today is as useful in dealing with, disagreements on the street or disagreements in your home with your family as it is with disagreements with somebody wearing a business suit on the opposite end of a conference room table. So I'm going to introduce mostly two styles of negotiation. These are the two styles that I swear by, the two that I use. And I have a few little tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way. I call these two styles, and they call themselves this to some extent, NVC style and FBI style. NVC style stands for nonviolent communication. It comes from not just a book. Originally it was a book called The Nonviolent Communication Handbook by Marshall Rosenberg. And it has since grown beyond books. It is audiobooks. It is YouTube videos. It is workshops. It is basically your primary ingredient in the field of conflict de-escalation. When I say conflict de-escalation, understand the idea of conflict escalation. Conflict escalation is, somebody taps your shoulder, so that leads to a push, so that leads to a punch, so that leads to a club, so that leads to a knife, so that leads to a gun, so that leads to a rifle, so that leads to a missile, so that leads to World War III. De-escalation is much more difficult. De-escalation is the art of taking this situation, which is on its way toward a violent outcome, and slowly, little by little, ratcheting down the level of violence that's involved in that. And nonviolent communication is a very effective method for de-escalation, but not only for de-escalation. It's very useful for negotiations of all kinds. But I'd like to begin the discussion about negotiation with a discussion of nonviolent communication, because NVC style is fundamental, and it's useful, especially if you are not practiced as a negotiator in other ways. What I mean by that is this. Other forms of negotiation, which I will cover today, FBI style, depend heavily upon your ability to manage the emotions of the people around you. And in order to manage the emotions of the people around you, you have to be able first to manage your own emotions. And the unfortunate reality is, very often, you are not able to do that. Very often, you find yourself negotiating with a family member who knows all your dirty secrets and knows exactly where your buttons are and knows exactly how to mess with you to throw you off balance. Or you may find yourself, hopefully not, on the street with a gun to your head, or faced with threats of going to prison yourself or to have someone you care about go to prison. And the fact is that if you're in those situations, you may find that you're not in control of your own emotions, let alone anybody else's. And when you're not in control of your own emotions, the idea that you're going to use some Jedi mind trick to get what you want out of a negotiation, probably not. Probably whatever I would teach you in that moment will go out the window. And you'll just go back to, and you're not going to get what you want that way. But what's nice about nonviolent communication is that for NVC, you do not have to be in control of your own emotions or anybody else's. NVC works if you've got a gun to your head. It works if you've got tears streaming down your face. It works reliably.
Hey, Pure, what
and
is
that's not
VC?
true of the other things. Nonviolent communication.
Oh, VC,
so
violent communication.
nonviolent
Okay.
communication,
Okay.
the reason why nonviolent communication works the way that it does is that it is solely about the words that come out of your mouth or out of your pen. It's about nothing else. You don't have to sound calm while you do it. You just have to push the words out of your throat. And if you can push the words out of your throat, you can solve problems. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am not in the position of coming to you and saying violence is never the answer. To the contrary. I know how many pounds of pressure it takes to pull a trigger. I can take a gun apart in the dark. I know how to crush a windpipe with one hand. I can do all that stuff. But all of that is not something you have to do in the vast majority of cases if you can have a conversation. And in self-defense, what I learned was Krav Maga. In Krav Maga, the thing is, if they're talking, you can probably walk. If a conversation is at all possible, it is unlikely that this other person, unless they have already made a conscious, premeditated decision to hurt you, they're probably not going to hurt you. Now, if this person has been sitting in their own bedroom, training and drilling and making a plan that they're putting into execution, then yeah, okay, they might talk before they hurt you. But if you're dealing with a kind of person who is just getting angrier and angrier and angrier, the moment at which violence becomes a near inevitability is the moment at which that person is so angry that they lose the ability to speak. Before that, you probably can de-escalate the situation if you do it right. If they're talking, you can probably walk. And if they're talking, you can probably just walk away, is the Krav Maga that I was taught. Okay, so we had a nice conversation, Zeit and I, before we got started. And we had the idea of violence as punitive and violence as protective. This is part of NVC style. I'm channeling Marshall Rosenberg by saying this. That you can think of violence that, okay, remove from your mind and from your heart any wish toward punitive violence. What I mean by that is, violence is not punishment. Violence is not an attempt to get someone to agree with you. It is not an attempt to prove you're right. It is none of this. That is all punitive use of violence. And although we do live in a world where major governments believe in punitive violence, the major governments of the world who believe in punitive violence are wrong in every sense. That is not what violence is for. Violence is protective. So if somebody's coming through your door and they've got a weapon and they are acting with the intent to do harm, then you do what you have to do. And so the attitude of the protective use of violence is, in every situation, what is the least violent thing I can do? And in some situations, the least violent thing you can do is to smash a beer bottle over one guy's face and slash another guy's throat with the remains. But it's never about teaching anyone a lesson. It's about taking a bad situation and making it as not bad as it can be. And so this is the attitude toward violence that I would encourage you to have, and that is part of NVC's system. Never give in to sadism. Never give in to cruelty. Never give in to, I want to hurt this person because it would make me feel good. Violence is a tool. It is not therapy. Okay? So that being said, I want to go into another little tidbit that is not part of NVC. It's part of something that I've learned as a teacher, because I say it all the time. Unnecessary apologies are a bad habit for a professional. Actually, unnecessary apologies are a bad habit for everyone. People who just, oh, sorry to bother you, sorry for breathing, sorry for this, sorry for that. Stop that. If you decide to apologize, I'm not saying never apologize, but if you are apologizing, you should have thought about the decision to apologize for more than 10 minutes. Okay? An apology is not, oh, I'm sorry, I did it wrong, I don't know. No. An apology is, you trusted me. I did something wrong. It hurt you. I know it hurt you. I'm sorry. I want to move forward. That's an apology. The use of the word sorry in any context but that cheapens it. So remove it from your vocabulary. In fact, the use of the word sorry makes you seem weak, out of control, and it suggests that you are not really in control of yourself, and if you're not in control of yourself, you're not going to be able to participate in a negotiation with anybody else. Now, another basic rule of negotiations before we get started, another word which should never be said in a negotiation, is the word why. W-H-Y. How is good. Why is bad. Why is an accusation. Why didn't you clean your room? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why are you doing that? People hear this and they hear accusation. They hear that you think that something is wrong with them. Specifically, they think that you are asking them to justify their existence. Never ask anyone to justify their existence, because the only way that people know to justify their existence is violence. Asking why is the move of a bully. Don't be bullies. Now, related to this is the idea that we should stay away from words that make judgment. And so this is something that I see among law students all the time. Always beware the client who comes to you and says, I was assaulted, I was robbed, I was harassed. They use these legal terms. Anyone who uses legal terms to describe what happened to them is running an angle on you. What they should say is, I was walking down the street and a guy came up and punched me in the face. And Juicy knows, because we've done this exercise, where I said, tell me the story of the 3 little pigs. And it took 2 hours. because it was always, no bad guys, no telling me what anybody was thinking, no telling me what was moral, what was immoral. Just tell me what happened. This is a very difficult thing to do, and I suggest that you try it sometime. Just go to somebody and say, tell me the story of the three, and we can do this some other time. Tell me the story of Cinderella, or something. Just tell it, but tell it without, as though it has no moral. And this is, you need, and that doesn't mean that we never have morals. It means that we save our judgments to the end. That the first time we tell the story without judgment. And only after we know everything do we move into the discussion of judgments. Okay, so what's so great about nonviolent communication? All right, here's how nonviolent communication works. It's like filling out a form. Here's the form. It says, I feel X because my need for Y is not being met. If you would Z, my need would be met and I would feel Z, well, double Z, A, and be grateful. This is a magic template. It's like filling out a form. And the reason why it works so well, the reason why you don't need to feel any particular way, is that if you can fill out the form, you can use this. And so you only need 4 pieces of information. And most of them are pretty easy to get, right? But you need to understand some limitations. You need to know that there are things that people put in those answer blanks that are not appropriate answers. I feel like I'm a beat your ass is not an appropriate answer to the first blank, okay? It needs to be a universal feeling. The point is, it's a feeling that everybody knows. I feel sad. I feel afraid. And generally it'd be a negative feeling, or you wouldn't be in a negotiation to begin with. I feel sad. I feel afraid. I feel angry, although anger is complicated. Anger is made of fear and usually some other ingredient. But to break it down into its simplest, most universal form is the beginning of that. And then the next point, because I have a need for blank. Because my need for an RTX 3090 is not an appropriate answer to that question. Because not everyone needs an RTX 3090, right? But you have a need for shelter, food, love, support, respect, understanding. It doesn't have to be basic, but it does have to be something that is universal. It has to be something that everybody would agree, I need that too sometimes. Okay? And if you would blank, this is the hardest one. We need here a request. To make a request, we have to be clear with people, we are not making demands. For purposes of NVC, we do not make demands, we make requests. And the requests must be actionable. Okay? So we do not, I mean, if we're ordering somebody around, which, you may do sometimes, but NVC is situational. It works in situations where we care what somebody else does, and we also care what reasons the other person has for doing the thing we want them to do. Okay? So mother doesn't want the baby, or doesn't want the child to clean the room because mother wants a clean room. I mean, she might like it. But mother also wants the child to clean the room because she wants the child to want to live in a clean room. She wants to teach the lesson that this is how we live. And so if we care why the other person does what it is we're asking them to do, NVC is appropriate. Of course, there are circumstances where we don't care. If somebody's got a gun pointed at your head, you probably don't care why. You just want it to stop. And in that case, NVC is a tool for you, although it has applications there too, and I'll get into that. But you need an actionable request. Actionable means right now. Means right the hell now. It means, if you would please take 2 steps back. That is actionable. Okay? What is not actionable is, if you would please be a nicer person to my mother. That's not actionable.
It's not actionable.
Okay? It needs to be a step that this person can take right then, right now, that would move in the direction of getting you what you want. Okay? And then I would feel, and usually whatever feeling it is would be, relieved, grateful, safe, whatever it might be. And if you can fill this out, it really doesn't matter how messed up you are in your emotions. Zeit, what's on your mind?
Okay, so if I'm having a argument, like the argument that's passed, but like I'm having a negotiation with a friend, and say they have a habit of calling me a bitch, right?
Okay.
But like I don't like that, but we're friends, so it's kind of okay, but it's kind of not. It's getting on my nerves. So would an appropriate use of that form be, I feel disrespected because my need for no, I think I messed it up.
Respect?
But yeah, okay, my need for respect isn't being met. If you would please refrain from calling me that in the future, I'd appreciate it.
We could do a little better than if you would please refrain in the future. Because remember, the request needs to be actionable now. So what could this person, that's a good one. We've got a negative case here. So what could this person do that would suggest that? Well, one thing they could do is they could tell you that they won't do it anymore. Right? So what if I were to say, I feel disrespected because my need for respect is not being met. If you were to say to me that you will not call me a bitch anymore, I would feel respected, and it would be more pleasant, more enjoyable for me to be in your presence, and I would respect you more.
Makes sense.
Right? And this is, this brings me into my next point, which is that there's a lot of people take this method and are very resistant to it for a couple of reasons, but let's say macho reasons. Let's say, I can't say on the street that shit to somebody. But the fact is, if you say it on the street, be surprised at how well it works. That, because you feel like,
reasonable.
well, I'm negotiating with somebody who doesn't care how I feel. I would look weak if I began a sentence with, I feel. But the truth is, it works.
Your friend, then...
Yeah, the truth is, it works. And,
friend, like, if they're just a reasonable person.
Yeah, well, this is vulnerability. Vulnerability is part of life. It is, and it's not for every situation. You know, life is a series of times where you allow yourself to be vulnerable and a series of times where you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, and you have to make the best decisions that you can with that. But I totally understand, and I take the position that the way that we allow another person to tell jokes about us sets the standard for how they're allowed to talk to us when they're not joking about us anymore. And therefore, I don't allow anybody to call me a bitch. And it is up to me.
Makes sense.
I can, you know, I've sometimes, you know, was in a conversation where somebody yelled, "Shut up!" And I said, "I will allow you to tell me to shut up once. The next time you do it, I'll hang up the phone." And that person never told me to shut up again. And so I think that's, you know, that's how you can set that up.
Where this is
so NVC works, and if you have the idea that, well, okay, but it wouldn't really work if you have a gun to your head, or really wouldn't work in this situation, really wouldn't work in that situation, let me run by a few situations. Reggie, what's on your mind?
This ain't a courtroom, but may I approach the kind of middle area so I can take a picture of the board? I didn't want to.
Yeah, do what you do.
Yeah.
So the book, Nonviolent Communication, talks about lots of situations in which Mr. Rosenberg was brought in to mediate conflict between people. And it has worked in mediating gang wars. It has worked in mediating labor disputes.
Would you send that to me?
It has worked in mediating, I'm not making this up, tribal warfare in the Middle East. And it works on people's families. And there's a story in the book it's full of testimonials of people who use this technique in this situation, that situation, and it works. And the story of a teacher alone in her classroom after it's all over, and a strange man barges in and says, "Take off your clothes! Take off your clothes right now!" And she says, "I feel afraid because my need for safety is not being met. If we could work together, I understand that you have a need for sex. If we could find a way to work together to make your need for sex met while still meeting my need for safety, it would make me feel better. It would make me feel relieved." And that brings me to an important, and it worked. What ended up happening was that this guy, you know, after a few rounds of this, you don't just do it once, you do it over and over and over again. After a few rounds of this guy, according to the testimonial, just ran off. She had somehow awakened his conscience.
To masturbate into the
and this happens, you know. Well, this was part of the conversations that you and I were having before class. I mean, true psychopaths are very, very rare. The fact is, most people have consciences which can be awakened.
Yeah.
That then raises the next question. One of the next issues with NVC is that you may say, yeah, that may work fine if both parties are using NVC. But if I'm the only one using NVC and they're not using it, then it's worthless, right? Wrong. Here's what you do. You have a magic phrase which is to be used all the time. The phrase is, "You seem like you feel ...
Seem like you feel.
You seem like
It's not
you
accusatory.
feel." So what you do is you take this recipe and you stick this on the front of it. And you say, you know, so Rosenberg talks about a case where he was coming in and somebody yelled, you know, to some place in the Middle East, and somebody yelled "murderer" at him. And he said, "You seem like you feel angry because your need for understanding is not being met." And then you wait. And then the person will say one of two things. "You're goddamn right!" In which case, great. then you follow up with, well, I have a need for safety, and that's not being met by you calling me a murderer. We can find a way to meet your need for respect and my need for safety, and we can work it out from there. And,
Nice.
long story short, he ends up having dinner at the guy's house who was calling him a murderer 3 hours ago. And this is the recipe. So You Seem Like You Feel has many applications, not only in NVC. This also has use in FBI style. But what you do is you feed it back to them. And if their answer is, that's not right, then you know what they're going to do? 9 times out of 10, they're going to feed it back to you properly. No, I don't feel angry. I feel disrespected, motherfucker. Well, now you know how they feel. See? Because the point of the negotiation is to get information. Every move in the negotiation is not about getting them to agree to a lower price. It's about getting information. Information about how they are feeling is among the most important information that you can get. Okay? So that is the basic idea of nonviolent communication, and you can use it if you're the only one in the room using it, and you can use it without control of your emotions. It is when everything else has failed, nonviolent communication will get you out of all kinds of bad situations. But if you are able to be in control of your emotions and to manage the emotions of the people around you, then let me suggest an alternative. An alternative is contained in a book called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. This, once again, is another very popular book. Lots of people are reading it. I'm not giving you too much in the way of ancient, obscure secrets. Chris Voss was the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. His job was to deal with the people who had a gun to somebody else's head. And these are his methods. There's a lot of overlap between NVC and FBI style, but NVC is much less of an art and much more of a science. It's very procedural. It's very fill out this sentence, put this information, pass it to the other person. If they don't fill it out, then say you seem like, and fill out this sentence and pass it back. And what's great about that is that it works no matter what you're feeling. But it's also very basic. Yeah, it's also very basic. It's a rather crude tool. It's a hammer, not a scalpel. And Never Split the Difference, or FBI style, is more of a surgeon's kit. And I'm going to go through a few principles and a few, not exactly Jedi mind tricks, but they're kind of Jedi mind tricks that FBI style teaches. So the first thing is that there is a negotiating voice. Actually, there's a negotiating voice, and this is true for public speaking generally. If we were teaching the public speaking class, then I would say to you that you should, whenever you want anyone to pay attention to you, lower the pitch of your voice by 2 octaves. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 2 do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do's down. That causes people to pay attention, and it's very effective for negotiations as well. Is this true for men and women? Yes, it's true for men and women. In fact, it is more important for women than it is for men. And I say this because there have been studies on the question of what is called the glass ceiling, the problem by which women can't seem to get the really high-level jobs, that they find that women who are capable of practicing both agentive and communal behavior at will, and this is not that class, that they are capable of rising to the highest ranks, but that society and their social pressures and so on makes it much harder to master both of these things. But To lower the pitch of your voice is one of the things that is part of that. And it works for everybody. If you've ever been in the presence of somebody who, when they get angry or they don't get their way, the pitch of their voice goes a little bit up and a little bit more up and a little bit more up. And I'm not knowing why you're not giving me what I want. You should give me what I want. I did it for you. Why aren't you thinking about all the things I did for you? Don't you know that? And why don't you fucking hate that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awful. That person
really
never
annoying.
gets what they want. Not really.
Mm.
I mean, they may get what they want now, but they'll pay for it later.
They paid for it with respect.
That's right. Because a principle of conflict management is that everything we say to someone has a dual purpose. It communicates something about the material conditions, what it is I want, what's going on with me. And it communicates something about the relationship between the two parties. And you can't
Makes
say
sense.
anything to anybody that doesn't communicate both of those pieces of information. And your tone of voice is critical in that. So you're lowering your tone of voice, if that's just for speaking generally. When you are in a negotiation, you're doing even more than that. In a negotiation, you're going with what Chris Voss calls the smooth-talking radio DJ voice. If you turn on an old radio or one of those podcasts to help you get to sleep at night, and it's just so smooth that you could just fade away. That's what you need to do.
Bro, I can literally feel it. My attention just what are you doing?
That's your negotiating voice, okay? It's very powerful in helping people relax, which is critical, whether you're trying to get a business deal signed or whether you're trying to get a gun moved away from somebody's head. Or whether you're trying to get your mother to let you get a Nintendo Switch, whatever. All right. So that's the idea of the voice. Related to the idea of the voice is the speed. Basic rule, and this works for NVC as well. Slow it down. We go low, we go smooth, and we go slow. Because slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And now this brings me to another little detail. This is not in any book. This is my special trick. Doesn't work for every situation. I mean, if you're in a situation, I wouldn't do this on the street. But if you're in, an argument with, say, someone in your family or a close friend, and you are not exclusively, but especially you gentlemen, if you're in the situation where, let's say, you're the bigger person in the room physically, or you're the person in the room who is more able to resort to violence, the moment you hear your family member, your girlfriend, whatever, start to raise the pitch of the voice, start to go for, some indication that you might be in an argument, the moment you hear that, write down. Just lowers the tension in the room so much if they know that you are not in a position to physically hurt them. It makes everything better. Now, obviously, if you're with a bunch of guys on the street and some of them have weapons, don't do that. But this is great advice for dealing, family members, romantic partners, so on. That's just my little tip, and it works wonders.
Sorry, I lagged out for a second. What did you say?
Just a little tip. When you're
position?
in a place where doing so is safe, and you sense that a fight is about to happen, just sit right down.
Nice.
It makes everything better. Sit right down and go directly into smooth talking, radio DJ, slow voice. It makes everything better. Everything's better that way if you can sit. You might not be able to sit. You might be on the street. People might have guns. But if you are able to sit, sitting is good. Okay?
Gotcha.
Now then, first and most important of the Jedi mind tricks, mirroring. To mirror someone in FBI style, it has many meanings, but in FBI style, to mirror a counterpart means to simply repeat either the last word that they said back to them or the most significant or the most questioned word back to them. So in a situation of hostage negotiations, I'm gonna kill you! Kill me?
You gonna kill me?
When you say it back to them, you put a little raise in it. You give the question mark.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna kill you! Kill me? Yeah, motherfucker! You killed my father! Killed your father?
What?
Yeah, and I saw you're part of you're one of them. One of them? And now
One
you're
of
getting to
them?
learn
Like-
this guy's story, and you're getting to learn what his deal is, and
Yeah.
you may be able to talk your way out of this situation. Right? And that's just when they're extremely angry. It's not required that they be extremely angry. It works. I find that it was, when I first read this book, I wanted to test it out. And I also wanted a Nintendo Switch. And so I just sat there. I just want to try something out with you, honey. And I think it would be great to have, and just mirrored everything she said back. Like 10 minutes, I had her agreeing to get me a Nintendo Switch. It was awesome. It's incredibly effective. Just keep repeating things back to people because there's something
The
you
most
can't
significant
help
thing
it.
or
I
the
mean, you
last
can
thing?
with training. With defense attorney training like I'd give you, when somebody says something back to you, you just go stone silent. But almost nobody, not even professionals, do this. What most people do is when they're confronted with a mirror, they seek to explain themselves. And in this way, they do what interrogators call getting information. They give you information without thinking about what they're giving you. Okay? So since the goal of every move in a negotiation is to get information, anything that gets them to vomit information is awesome. And mirroring is an incredibly effective trick. And even the guy who wrote the book tells stories about how somebody mirrored him and it worked on him. It's like a punch to the face. It doesn't matter how much training you have. If you get hit with it, it works. So
Nice.
just repeat. And if you don't know what to say, just repeat the last thing they said back to them. Keep them talking. Because remember, your goal is to get information. That means if they're doing the job right, their goal is to get information from you. That means if you're the one talking, you're the one losing. So keep them talking. And mirroring is a very valuable tool to keep them talking. It will allow you to get them to vomit up the information that you need. Okay? Next Jedi mind trick.
Oh my god.
The open-ended how question. Remember how I said, never say why? I stand by that. Works for FBI style as well as NVC
Never
style.
say why, but how is
But
okay.
how? How is a magic question. Chris Voss's book begins with him being brought into Harvard Law School and sat down by some of the Harvard professors to show his method. And they said, we've kidnapped your son. We're going to kill him if you don't give us $30,000. And he knew perfectly well they didn't really have his son. It was a game. But his answer was, how can I do that? How can I do that if I don't even know you have him? Right? He didn't rush in and say, I need proof of life. Show me photos. No. How can I do that? How do I even know you have him? Right? Because if you rush in and you say, show me photos, you are solving their problems. You want them to solve your problems. Open-ended how questions in a negotiation do that. How can I do that? How can I give you money if I don't even know you have him? How can I give you money if I don't even know where you want me to put it? How can I give you money if I don't, how can I give you what you want? How can I do that? How can I do that? Because like mirroring, it comes across as a call for clarification. And even angry people, everybody is always willing to clarify their position. And every move that they make in clarifying their position, they get it. And in the book, he goes on negotiating against these Harvard law professors just over and over. How do I do that? How can I do that? Goes on for like 30 minutes. And then at the end, they go, okay, well, I guess we didn't end up, killing your son. And he ended up winning the negotiation. So mirroring, and you can move them together. If you can't think of a how question, that's fine. Move them, make a mirror move, and set that up. Okay, now then there is the idea of tactical empathy. This is related to something I was talking about in NVC. Our magic phrase here, "You seem like you feel," has application here. But rather than using it to create our NVC program, we're going to just use it by itself. You seem like you don't want to go back to, it's not, and you remove the feel for purposes of this. Sometimes you have it, but it's not required. You seem like you don't want to go back to prison. You seem like you want my client to do life. You seem upset. You seem this, you seem that. And this works in FBI style for the same reason that it works in NVC style. Because when you do that, they're going to do one of two things. They're either going to say, "You're goddamn right," and then you know how they're feeling, or you know that you're right. Or they're going to say, "No, that's wrong, it's like this." And then you learn that. And remember, every move in the negotiation is about getting information.
Nice.
So, and they may not respond. There's a story in the book of some hostage takers who took, a couple of hostages and locked themselves in an apartment. And SWAT team was surrounding the place. The cops were, talking about, do we go in, and so on. And the negotiator just stood at the door and said, "You seem like you don't want to go back to prison. You seem like you don't know what to do. You seem like you're scared." And just keep getting in the heads of these people. You may not every "you seem like" is going to work. Or not, it doesn't have to be "you seem like." It can be "it seems like." It seems like this, it seems like that. And as they were doing this in the story, they were getting no response back. And so what he instructed his, subordinate negotiators to do was to stand at the door and just keep doing it. For 5 hours, they stood at the door. "You seem scared. It seems like you're scared. It seems like you don't know what to do. It seems that..." After 5 hours of this, the door opens and the gunmen threw out their weapons and came out with their hands up. And they said, we were ready to fight to the death, but it really seemed like you understood us. Okay? Tactical empathy, brilliant like that. And it's that procedural. It's just "you seem like." And if you don't know what to do, if they say something to you and you can mirror it, great. Mirror it back to them every single time. If you've ever seen me in cross-examination, I mirror the witnesses who I'm cross-examining. But maybe they don't say anything. Well, then what are you supposed to do? If they don't say anything, you can't mirror them. All right? In that case, go to tactical empathy. You seem like this. You see, it seems like that. And at some point in this process, there will come a moment where their counterpart will say to you, "That's right." The first time a counterpart says to you the words, "That's right," is the critical point in the negotiation. It is the moment that you are out of the forest and you have found your first patch of common ground. And once you find your first patch of common ground, then you can use NVC, or you can start to negotiate from there. What's on your mind, Zayt?
Is this why the right to remain silent is so important? Like, does the right to remain silent counteract all of this? Like if you just
Okay.
like don't say
Two
anything at all.
questions. Does the right to remain silent counteract this, and does it? Well, first of all, today is negotiations class, not interrogations class.
But,
However, all good negotiations are interrogations. So what about the right to remain silent? Well, if you know me and you've ever attended my class before, you know I say never talk to the police. Never, never, never. And I stand by that. And this is indeed one of the things that the police will use. I mean, the guy who wrote the book with the training methodology that I am giving you was a Fed. Not just a Fed, he was the Fed. Okay? So this is what they would do. I mean, the interrogations thing was vomiting information was not his idea. That's from a book I read called How to Find Out Anything from Anybody, which I haven't read in a while. I think it was written by a military intelligence guy. But he had the vomiting information idea, but there's overlap there. That these are techniques which cause you to vomit information, and that is why if you suspect that you are, being held responsible for a crime, don't say anything. And just never talk to the police. And so, yes, that is true. And there is a solution to some of these, which is shut your fucking mouth. And if you're the person in the handcuffs, or you just are being talked to, just don't talk to them. Just don't talk to them. However, it's not realistic to say that you will just go through life without ever talking to anybody ever. The fact is you are going to need to talk to somebody at some point. And so, when you do so properly, and these are the techniques to help you with that. Okay. So, tactical empathy has that. Now, another principle, disclose your deadlines. In most negotiations, there will be information that you wish to keep secret from the other side. And you will fully suspect that there's information that the other side will wish to keep secret from you. By the way, this, in my humble opinion, is a weakness of NVC style. It seems to me that NVC style depends upon the assumption that you and your counterpart are willing to lay your cards on the table, that you're willing to be honest. I don't know that NVC is effective against someone who has made a conscious decision to be dishonest. But it is the art of negotiation that some information is kept secret. That's life. But one piece of information which should never be kept secret is your deadlines. Do not lie about your deadlines. Do not say, I will, do not impose false deadlines. Do not say, well, at the end of the day today, we're all going to go and you're going to lose the negotiation and the deal will suffer, if that's not true. Be honest about your deadlines, disclose your deadlines. And this is true, but what if I'm dealing with a bad guy? Well, remember, the guy who wrote this book is FBI, and the guys he deals with are terrorists. So and it's full about the importance of disclosing your deadlines. The moment at which this negotiation will fail if we don't have a deal is at this point, and this is the reason. Because that will allow the other side it will create the urgency where the urgency needs to be. It will prevent miscommunications, and miscommunications about that can lead to fuck-ups of all kind. So always disclose your deadlines. And then one more little mind trick is the method of getting to know. Now, back in the 1970s, there was a book which they made all salesmen read called Getting to Yes. And it was the established wisdom. And the idea was what you had to do was get your counterpart to say the word yes as quickly as possible. Nice day, isn't it? Yes? The idea was that if you got them to say the word yes, that somehow that would, program in their brain that they were ultimately going to say yes to you. And the discovery of the FBI since the 1970s has been that getting to yes is a bad strategy. It doesn't work. Not only does it not work, but they find that a much better strategy is getting to know. Get the other person to say the word no. This does a lot. So they give a story about some Republican fundraisers who were trying to get money so that they could elect the next Republican candidate. And they had been making cold calls to people asking for money, and they had this script that they would follow. And they would say, you know, do you love freedom? Well, yes. And do you believe that democracy is important? Well, yes. And do you believe that you should support your local government? I mean, yes. Then, sir, we would like it if you would please give us money. Okay? This was bullshit. It didn't work. But they traded it out for a new script, which said something to the effect of, "Hi, sir. Do you love the government?" Which in the United States, if you did that in China, I don't know that everybody would say no. But in the United States, everybody says, "No, I don't love the government. Fuck the government." Oh, okay. Well, in that case, do you intend to allow the government to push you around for the next 4 years? What? No, I don't intend to allow the government to push me around for the next 4 years. So are you just going to sit there and take it while these bad politicians take over our country? No, I'm not just going to sit there and take it. So you're not going to give me any money, though. Well, God damn it, yes I will. And they were able to raise great sums of money in this way. In a negotiation, it is
really good.
of the utmost importance that at every moment your counterpart feel that they are free to say no.
No.
They should never feel intimidated. And as much as you are able, I mean, you may not be able to. You may be in a situation, where there's guns pulled and you can't let, people can't leave. But unless you're in a situation like that, I like when I'm negotiating with somebody and I want them to feel comfortable, I go into the room first. This is a good idea for public speaking generally. Control the space. But I go into the room first and I put myself, if we're at a table, I try to put myself near the back. Why? If I'm further from the door, then they have the right to get up and leave. And I want them to feel like they have the right and the power to get up and leave. Because I only want them there if they absolutely agree to everything that we're doing here. Because if you don't, what you may end up with is something called a hollow yes. The hollow yes is what happens when somebody says, yeah, I'll come. Yeah, I'll do that thing. And then
Say something.
they just don't. But getting to know prevents that. Reggie, what's on your mind?
Yeah, this is probably a shitty question, but what do you?
No such thing.
Do you still because the common tactic for police interrogations is you stand in between the door and the suspect, which is the opposite of what you stated. Would you disagree with that tactic on that basis?
That's an excellent question. I really appreciate that. So, I have the great privilege of asking one of my Chinese students to teach me Chinese police interrogation tactics. And he happened to be an ex-cop. And, he said, and he gave me all the details, how you chain them to the chair, where the blind spots in the cameras are in case they're going to fall down, all that shit. And he said, I like to stand over them, and I like to put my hand on their shoulder. God, fuck the police. Guy is a fucking bully. And I think the training that you're hearing comes from police. Remember, ACAB, all cops are bullies. And that is an absolute bully tactic. No doubt about it. And the idea, because I said to this cop, you do that, you put the hand on the shoulder because you want to communicate to the other person. I'm not going to hurt you. but I could if I wanted to, and we both know it, don't we? That's what that does.
God damn.
Right? That's what that does. When you put yourself between them and the door, the point is, and nobody will say this out loud, but this is a question. Remember, that's not a pure negotiation, that's an interrogation. But think of it this way. Let's take, for example, the case of torture by U.S. forces in the Middle East, okay? How they were taking large numbers of people off the streets of Iraq, throwing them into Abu Ghraib prison, and they're proceeding to come up with every kind of sick, twisted torture they could think of. Well, a basic rule of interrogation, the first rule of interrogation is have someone who knows what it is you want to know. If the person you're interrogating doesn't know what you want to know, don't bother. If your objective is to get what is called reliable information. But here's the thing. Cops, because we're talking about police interrogations, in police interrogations, and similarly in military interrogations in Iraq and Afghanistan, the true goal is not reliable information. The true goal in that case is specific information. There's a difference. Okay? Reliable information means I need to know that the information that this person gives me is true. And why would you need to know that? Well, let's say you've got a missing girl. You don't want to tell you that she's, at 555 Old Holland if she's not, right? You need to know where the girl really is. But if all you want is a confession, it doesn't really matter whether it's true, does it? As long as it is a specific piece of information. This is why in U.S. case law, the seminal case is about, there's been, I think it was a murder, or may have been a rape, and the sheriff of this southern town just came up and grabbed the nearest black guy and chained him to a tree and got the whip and started whipping him. And said, I'm going to go until you say you did it. Well, he said he did it. Of course he did. And when a police officer sits between you and the door in the United States, when they chain you to the table in China and put the hand on your shoulder, what they're saying to you is, if I wanted to, I could drive you out in the country, stand you in a ditch, put two in your head, and no one would ever find you. So say what I tell you to say. That's what cops do. That is my opinion as having been a practicing attorney, seeing hundreds of cases. Police rule by fear, even in the United States. And these subtle little bullshit tactics where they put themselves between the person and the door, and it's all intended to send a clear message to the accused. Do what I say or I'll kill you. And that is my sincere and honest opinion of how police work in every country in the world. So does it work as a means of getting confessions? You bet it does. It absolutely works. Does it work as a means of getting true confessions? No. It's very good at getting false ones. So that's my answer to that question.
I was kind of more referring to effectiveness.
Well, effectiveness at what, though, right? Effective at getting them to say I did it, or effective at finding out whether they really did, right? Because you've got your margin of error, right? If you put someone in a situation where they feel like, and this is, having studied false confessions, there's John Oliver actually did a piece on this. If you were to go to YouTube and type in Last Week Tonight, and just type Last Week Tonight false confessions, John Oliver has like this 30-minute bit about how false confessions happen. And this was stuff that I was, studying and training with before he did it. But, I was a professional, and it was really cool that he was taking this and spreading it where everybody could see it. But the most common reason for a false confession is that the person who is confessing feels that they can confess now and that later they will be able to say that they were coerced.
Mm.
And the truth of the matter is, the vast majority of the time, they will not be able to. There are rare cases where, yes, okay, people are exonerated after having spent years or sometimes decades in prison. But the reality is that there are probably many, many more false confessions than will ever actually be discovered. And therefore, the solution is don't talk to the police. Don't do it. Okay? Because number one, the
Gotcha.
police have the legal right to lie to you. They have the right to lie to you not only about what the law is, they can lead you to believe that what you did was legal when in fact it was not. And they have the right to lie to you about the evidence. They have the right to tell you that they have evidence that they do not have. And having gone over and over and over for hours and hours on end, placing themselves beside the door, chaining you to the table, putting their hand on your shoulder, moving you around, controlling when you eat, when you sleep, people break.
Mhm.
And the best that you can do is keep your mouth shut. So, in the United States, I don't want to talk to you without a lawyer or the magic words. And if they say to you, well, you don't have to talk, buddy, just listen. Say, lawyer, 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 lawyer. I don't want to listen to you. Because they are lying.
Yeah.
They're always lying. And if you want to know the evidence against you when you're the accused, there's a very simple way. The police have the right to lie to you, but the district attorney doesn't have the right to lie to your lawyer. So get a lawyer. You'll find out the evidence against you at that time. Okay? And that's, you know, how that relates. But this isn't really, this, I didn't intend for this to be the self-defense against police interrogations class, but yeah, sure, we can do that,
That was
too.
my fault.
Okay.
No, not at all. It was a very good question. But as you know, there are certain, I have a little bit of a, well, from having heard my earlier class on war stories from Pure and my background, you know that I have a few political hot buttons. That's one. So that is the basic
Jedi mind tricks.
idea of, some good Jedi mind tricks with there. And we started about 5:30. It's about, or we started at 3:30. It's 4:30. This class usually lasts 1 hour. So I think it's a good, and I have covered all the stuff I really wanted to cover. So I can open it up to questions.
Okay. Is there, like, with the tone, like, I noticed when you touched my shoulder, like, you shifted your tone a little bit, like, I don't remember what you said.
But we both know I could
like
if I wanted to.
Yes, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Like,
Scared the fuck out of you,
that's a
didn't it?
part of, like, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that was a threat. And it was a game. I would never hurt you, Zeitgeist. And I can't, because you're on the other end of a VR headset. I don't know where the fuck you are. But yeah, that wasn't smooth radio
Yeah, but the
DJ
shifted
style.
tone was a nice touch.
That was my eyes are looking through you kind of tone.
Nice.
Right. That's the, you know, you are the waterfall that my fist will go through tone. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, that is not appropriate for negotiation. It is, you know,
like, I'm really glad you like spoke about the difference between the way how like a legitimate interrogation is supposed to go when you're like seeking the truth and what the police do. Like, that was really useful.
Yeah. Well, you know, they call it the competitive enterprise of seeking justice, I think is how the courts call it. But, you know, if you're a cop, you're under a lot of pressure from other cops to get convictions. That's the pressure. And, you know, I mean, I had a presentation, somebody presented me a Chinese case. I often do this, where I say to my students in China, tell me a Chinese case. And I said, tell me a Chinese case of a wrongful confession. And they said, well, there was this case out in Mongolia where this guy, some old woman was murdered in a bathroom somewhere. And they brought in this guy and chained him to a radiator and beat the fuck out of him, I think, until he confessed. And then they executed him. From arrest to execution in 2 months.
God damn.
And then...
I blame the radiator.
And then... No, it gets better. And then they discovered that he was innocent. I said, how did they discover he was innocent? They said, well, somebody else confessed.
Shocking.
And so they gave the dead person a retrial. They gave a second trial to a dead person. This doesn't happen in the United States. They gave a second trial to a dead person where he was pardoned, or not pardoned, but posthumously acquitted. And then they proceeded to take the second guy who had confessed and convicted him of it.
At least they didn't get
I said, if you can't trust the confession of the first guy, what makes you think you can trust the confession of the second guy? They said,
methodology is flawed.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the answer is so. If you have the right to an attorney, then say, I want an attorney. If you don't have the right to an attorney, just shut up. Say nothing. And this brings me to a nice little point about the relationship of the power move. Let's say that I'm sitting in a prison somewhere, and I've got a chain. I'm chained to a desk. And some cop is going to stand over me and put his hand on my shoulder. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to make myself more vulnerable. This is the only power that I have in that situation. But, making yourself more vulnerable in a negotiation or in a scary situation is in many cases the right move. This is what I was saying about how, fellas, if you get into an argument with, your romantic partner, just sit right down.
Especially
and, if you were... Yeah. And if you find yourself chained to a table and you don't want to fight back, which is probably a good idea, I want a lawyer, and then close your eyes, because he can't scare you by staring into your eyes if your eyes are closed. And if you've read my thing about, what to do in certain police interrogation situations, I say there are some times where closing your eyes is the right move. So that is, and if you were to, if you were, hypothetically, don't ask me how I would know this, if you were to, for example, take a class in the fine art of tying people up for their entertainment, then what you would learn is that power and control go together like heads and tails of a coin. That the more control you have over somebody, the less power. And the more power, the less control. And so sometimes, this is why, if somebody, there's a animated cartoon from a podcast where like this guy was like trying to impress his father-in-law or something, or was trying to impress the guy who he wanted to be his father-in-law, and ended up like they were in the ocean and like turned the father-in-law over because he was like on this like floaty thing, and the father-in-law just held on to the alligator, to the floaty thing, and just stayed there till the guy who had turned him over panicked and turned him back over. Oh my God, are you okay? And the podcaster commented on this, said that was a power move. Because the point was that you thought you were taking control, you thought you were bullying this guy around, but this guy put you in a situation where you were the one who undid the thing you did, and all of the control, all of the power that you thought you had was taken away. right? And so in a negotiation, you know, that's a useful tool. And if you find yourself chained, I mean, if I were to find myself chained to a table, I would definitely close my eyes because I can't, there's no point fighting. You might as well just, you know, make them feel like they have no excuse, you know, to make yourself, in that case, sufficiently vulnerable. This is a tactical call. Sometimes it's the right move. Sometimes it's a terrible move. That's life, and you figure out what the right move is for that particular situation. But Reggie, you'll remember when I told you that for great public speakers, the art of a good public speaker, the good public speaker should unbutton his blazer.
Oh,
right?
You know that's never left me.
And the
You know
story
it's
of
never left me.
Napoleon, as Napoleon returned from the Isle of Elba and was surrounded by warriors, an army sent to kill one man. And nobody wanted to be the man to pull the trigger on Napoleon. And Napoleon opens his jacket and says, "You have orders to kill me? Well, here I am." And he went back into Paris, leading the army that had been sent to kill him. Shaka Zulu in Africa, great warlord, would hold court naked. Are there any other politicians, great, powerful, history-making figures who would hold court completely naked as a show of power? Cleopatra would do that. I can think of someone else who does that. And with those words...
There's a guy in the oh, no.
And with those words, I think we're at a good place to call this class over.